we go. All right. Well, listen, David, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And a special thank you to the Scarsdale Library for sponsoring this event. And as David said, thank you all for coming here and online. So, as a topic, motherhood strikes a chord in us because many of us are mothers, some are grandmothers, stepmothers, foster mothers, or godmothers. Motherhood's a journey. It's a journey that changes over time depending on what's going on in your life, and it adapts to changing family structures, needs, historical, and cultural shifts. But one thing we can agree on is everybody has a mother. So today we'll explore how artists have portrayed aspects of motherhood, from the religious Madonna and Child to more personal secular images. And we'll look to see how these depictions reflect enduring emotions, developing ideas, and most of all, shifting attitudes about being a mother. So let's start with the first image of a mother and child called Ada and Vincent. So before I say anything about this image, what do you see? Shout out a description or a word, and people, you can put it in the chat if you're on Zoom. What do you get out of this image when you look at it? Anything?
The boy's eyes.
The boy's eyes, yes. The boy's eyes. He doesn't want to be here. It's kind of like complex in a way. The mother's kind of staring out at you, kind of melancholy, but that's Alex Katz's style. But the boy, his son, Vincent, clearly doesn't want to be here. He wants out of this picture. So this is a giant picture. So in real life, it kind of made me uncomfortable. But I yearned for other images, as we're going to see in the next one. I wanted a straightforward, kind of neutral looking mother and child. Here, they're looking right at you. It's a religious mosaic painting. It's in Hagia Sophia in Turkey, and it's in the Alps. But you see, they're looking right at you, but not engaging with you on an emotional level. You see the Madonna is wearing her traditional blue or purple mantle and robe, and you see the Christ child has a halo. What happens is over time, when you look at the development of mother and child paintings, you come across this a lot in Eastern Byzantine Orthodox time. Goes back to the 11th, 12th century, and they call it the Madonna of Eluso, and it's the mother of tenderness. It's a cheek-to-cheek iconography that is, depicts an intimate moment of closeness, like skin-to-skin contact. And you see that it's a tradition that goes on and stays around. On the right is a 20th century devotional image, and it's the same format. So this is something that, pay attention to this because it kind of permeates all of art history afterwards. So we're into the early Renaissance, and we see mother and child. So the upper left is Duccio. So I put that up here because I wanted you to see what a $45 million painting looks like. It's at the Metropolitan Museum. It's kind of small, but it's rare. So when you look at this, you see the babies reaching up for the Madonna. That's similar to the Madonna of Tenderness that we just saw. And you can tell that it's Duccio. You look at the faces, they're painted very similarly. But this grouping is really up here because what's happened is over time, the early Renaissance people put Madonna on a throne. So the Madonna is a spiritual figure, but almost like a symbol of royalty. These two paintings, or this painting, the far left is in the Metropolitan Museum. This painting by Giotto is in the Metropolitan Museum. And you see in Florence, it has more weight. There are more of an awareness of perspective in this throne. But then when you go and you look at the throne in modern art, you see the throne's been deconstructed completely. It's cut, and you see the Madonna has been dismembered by Salvador Dali, and the Christ child is dismembered by Salvador Dali. He borrowed imagery, this is common in our history. So here's the shell and the egg. So Salvador Dali borrows it from Piero della Francesca in the 15th century, but he inverts it. He's into emotion and dreams and subconscious and sexuality, so he doesn't want to do anything predictable. The interesting thing about Salvador Dali is he considered himself a really religious man, and he didn't see any conflict within himself between cutting everybody up, dismembering them, and the religion. And he even met the Pope, and he might have presented or at least shown this image to the Pope. So I just found that really fascinating. Marc Chagall, on the other hand, just shows you a mother and a child sitting on a chair instead of a throne. And you might think that maybe there's some religious symbolism in here. He used a lot of symbols, the tree of life, and you have the donkey. And you think, okay, well, maybe this is a nativity. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. But Marc Chagall was Jewish, and he called baby Ida Little Donkey. So it simply could be a depiction of his nickname for his little daughter. And you see here, it's the Madonna of Tenderness in a different form. It's now in cut marble, very delicate carving by Donatello in the early Renaissance. And when you look at this, there's no halos. You do have the mantle of the Madonna, but it's a very affectionate picture, and it reflects the humanism of the time. That was the Renaissance in Florence. And then also in Florence, there was, you see on the lower right-hand side, they had a big workshop of Luca del Robbio, who did ceramics, but his images, they tended to have halos and cupids, and they were more overtly religious. I love this painting. I could spend a whole session on this, but I won't. One of the things that strikes me when you first see it is this is a painted frame. It really looks like a wooden frame, but it's not. It's in the style of the Trump oil that you see later, like in American art and Dutch. And if you start from the top to the bottom, you see this wonderful Northern Renaissance background. And you see a very slight hint of the halo. It's just kind of outlined, and it's almost like it's glass. You look at the drapery on her hair. It's exquisitely painted. It's so diaphanous. The Madonna herself is looking down, though. It's almost as if she's in prayer. The baby reaches for her. Again, an influence of earlier times. She's sitting on a chair instead of a throne. This is an armrest. But the most intriguing part to me is this little angel here. He's looking right at you, very mischievous, kind of like a troublemaker. So I sit here and I say, I wonder what he's really thinking. And what makes it unique is that there's humor in here. You do not usually see humor within a religious image, especially not of mother and child. But anyway, it kind of stands out. And thank you, David, for pointing me in that direction. In contrast, very serious image of Madonna and child, only the child is Jesus grown up. He's a man, he's dead, and it's the last time she sees him. It's Michelangelo's Pietà in the Vatican, in St. Peter's Basilica. And you can feel the emotion, you can feel the grief. It's interesting because this is the only signed piece by Michelangelo. He signed it on the sash of the Madonna. So has anybody been to Raphael's show, Sublime Poetry? Okay, so This is from a show that's at the Metropolitan Museum right now. It's a blockbuster show, and I'd highly recommend it, but be prepared for a lot of drawings and a lot of reading. So on the left here, you see I picked this painting or this drawing because of how active the baby was, the Christ child. It's just active, like a normal kid. You don't see religious overtones here. And I looked at it and I said, I wonder if this is a Leonardo da Vinci. I was convinced it was a Leonardo da Vinci, but it isn't. It's Raphael after he went to Florence and he studied with Leonardo da Vinci, who encouraged him to do rapid sketches to try and free himself up and catch movement and catch energy. And he was very successful, I think, in this drawing. On the right, you have the Alba Madonna, which is different than a lot of pictures in its format. First of all, it's circular. And then you see the Madonna, you see the Christ child, and then all of a sudden you see John the Baptist. So John the Baptist he's a saint. He has all kinds of implications in terms of biblical terms and the foretelling of Christ. But St. John the Baptist was also the patron saint of Florence. So it could be simply that, it's both secular and religious overtones. There's symbolism in the flowers and again, a beautiful background. And so I included this to give you an incentive to go see the show. But here's the painting. They kind of set up an architecture like a cupola, two cupolas in the room full of the oil paintings so that you don't get lost in the space because it's quite a large exhibit. When you move on into the 17th to 19th century and you look at the North, you look at the Netherlands and you look at Belgium, what happens is you see everyday life. You see genre scenes. So on the left, though, you see an image that's associated with foster care. So the presumption is that this is a foster mother feeding the child. And on the right, you see afternoon lesson. It's an intimate family scene. You see the kids are reading, the baby's sleeping, the mother's sewing. It's kind of a scene from everyday life, and it's very poignant. So keeping with that theme of just being very sweet, this is a painting on the left by Lebrun. And Lebrun is one of the first female painters in art history that's recognized. Like you go through the history of art and it's all men. It's as women didn't exist. But she got recognized because she was the official court painter to Marie Antoinette. And yeah, you see a self-portrait with her daughter, Julie, and it's got a feminine feel. It's a beautiful painting. So on the right, you have a different form of mothering. It's a sibling caring for her younger child who's clearly, the title of it is Inconsolable. So you see, when you talk about, motherhood and mothering and mother, care, it takes all kinds of different forms. This kind of sets us up for the Impressionists in the 19th century. And the thing about the Impressionists is they weren't portraying religious images for the most part. They wanted to show everyday life. And they did it with broken brush strokes. They were into the paint and showing the paint and the process. Like here you see little patches of red on the left here. The flowers, if you get up closer, they're just dabs of paint. And you have broken brush strokes here. You see the mother sewing and the son. This is, by the way, Monet's wife and son. Son is reading. And this one, Renoir on the right, another very sweet image, but painted very differently than Lebrun. The paint is the star. The color is the star. And the mother and child here are waiting. They're waiting for somebody. They're on a terrace. So that's 19th century. But when you talk about motherhood and Impressionism. The one who you really have to talk about is Mary Cassatt. She kind of owns this space. And there was a major Cassatt show that I somehow missed in Philadelphia. Anybody see it? Yeah, I mean, take me with you next time. But Mary Cassatt spent her whole career basically doing mothers and children, and she's American. She went over and she went to France and she painted with the Impressionists. And in the far left, you can see the brushstrokes are very loose and had an influence on her. But I think of her more American because she has like structure. This is a very structured painting. And so is this. It's a pastel. But you see the everyday, you see here the mother kissing the child. Remember we used to play beauty parlor with our kids? Those days are over, but we have it in Mary Cassatt. You see her bathing the child. The only painting here that is not by Mary Cassatt is The Cradle by Berthe Morisot, who Mary Cassatt painted with, and really has a substantial body of work. Sometimes you can actually, they painted together, you could actually confuse Cassatt with Berthe. But anyway, when you talk about mother and child, to me, this is the quintessential painter that you look at. So this is here to, because I have to admit to my own biases, okay? I saw this as a thumbnail painting on the far left. I saw that on the internet, very small, and I thought, oh, what a beautiful image of mother and child. And then I blew it up, and what do you know? It's a man, looks like a rock star to me. And you realize that you have your own built-in biases because you're female and you're a mother, but now you have untraditional families, you have two men that are mothering, you just, who's to say that a man can't have as much emotional connection with a child as any mother? And that's an example of a painting where you see it happening. What happens too in this painting is kind of unique because it's called paternal love. Like David just asked for a talk on paternity. I would start with this one. The husband lost his wife, and at the time that he lived, there was kind of, the norm was a strict father that didn't take any nonsense, didn't show any emotions. But here he is playing with his kids, his father, it's 3 generations looking on. There's a lot of emotional support. And it just completely broke all the norms of the time. You just didn't see that, and you still don't see a lot of this today. But it shows that true happiness can be found in the family. Yeah. Because there's written material by the artists. So at the time, people wrote about it, and it was exhibited. Okay, good question. Okay, so I put a Picasso in here because you look at motherhood and child on the left and the right, and you see how his attitude changed towards the family unit. On the left, you see the blue period. You see 2 paintings. You see a mother and child. It's called Maternity, but she's wearing the blue cloak that evokes the religious spirit of the Madonna. I thought this was going to be Madonna and child, but it wasn't. And this one in the center is still the blue period. He's influenced by these elongated figures of El Greco, who was also a Spaniard. But it was painted after he visited a prison hospital. So he basically, depicted social reality. Here she's sitting on the floor. She's not on a chair like on the left. She doesn't have shoes. She's in poverty. But he still evoked the Christian imagery and the social reality. So on the right here, you look at Picasso, and this is his classical period. It's 20 years later. And he was designing for Ballet Russe, for the Russian ballet, and he was being exposed to classical art for the first time, Ingres and Renoir. And he got married to Olga. and had a son. And so he came back to this mother and child theme, and you see like a kind of stability of, I would dare say, happiness, calmness, completely different attitude than 20 years before. Here we have Jackie and Caroline, a quintessential image. And there's this whole body of presidential portraits and photography, but this is the one that sticks with me the most. And but it's also propaganda, because this was when John JFK was running for president the first time, and he was trying to have broad appeal. It doesn't change the fact it's beautiful interaction between mother and child, and affectionate and real. It wasn't posed. They didn't do formal portraits for the most part. But it's so seared into my consciousness, and maybe yours, that when I went to the Whitney Biennial and I looked at this painting on the right, I looked at the hair, I looked at the pearls in the dress and the little white collar, and I said, oh my God, it's Jackie and Caroline. And what's interesting about it is that the artist has a halo on both of them. So it's almost like, there's a religious kind of royalty connotation to these two figures. I think they're as close to a king and a queen and a family that we have. We don't have Queen Elizabeth or anything, but we have Jackie. So after, when you talk about motherhood, there's many phases to motherhood. You get pregnant, and then you don't actually see that many images of that during the 15th century. But here you have two angels, a little bit different than usual Annunciation scenes, but you have two angels pulling back this theatrical tapestry to show the pregnant Madonna, and this is in the 15th century. And she has the halo, and she has the blue dress. She also has that egg-shaped face we saw before. I always thought these images were kind of funny. They're Byzantine Orthodox going back to Russia and Greece. And you show a picture of a woman, the Virgin Mary, and you have this little circle in here with a full-grown baby with a halo. And it just is very whimsical. Apparently Chagall thought so too, because even though he's Jewish and he lived in Russia and he saw all of these icons, but he has a baby. How old do you think that baby is? Yeah, 45, somebody said. Yeah, I mean, it could be a teenager in there, and that's his depiction of a pregnant woman. This is a common image. It's two pregnant women in the story of Christ. It's the visitation of Mary to Elizabeth. And what you see Mary on the right, the mother of Jesus, and you see Elizabeth on the left, the mother of John the Baptist, who, as I mentioned before, are cousins. And it's a very supportive picture. It kind of reminded me of my mother's group when I was pregnant and when the kids were young. But it's a shared journey, and it's mutual emotional support, and it kind of comes through. So I asked myself, well, what are the oldest images of maternity, of mother and child? And they go back to 10 to 35,000 years ago. And what was the purpose of this? These are small statues that you could carry. They're portable. And remember, these were people living during the Ice Age, and it was a struggle just to survive. So they use this kind of meditative, spiritual, and I don't know this for a fact, but what else could it be? Like hope. This is what they wanted for their future. They wanted fertility. They wanted survival. And they also wanted prosperity. And there's quite a number of these around. We see German 16th century, a pregnant Madonna, and the thing, pregnant Mary. The thing is that somehow it was much more real to me to see her pregnant in sculpture than in painting. And the same thing, here we have a pregnant Statue of Liberty. That was, I looked at that and I said, why did you do that? Well, it was done for Beijing, the 2008 Olympics. And at the time, China was trying to redo their PR, their image. And so this is kind of a rebirth of China. It's a metaphor in a way. And then this is Gustav Klimt's version of a pregnant wife. It's at the Neue Gallery in New York City. It's entitled Hope 2. Why Hope 2? If you look, it's beautifully painted. You have the influence of Byzantine mosaics in the coloring, even though it's not mosaics. But you see coming out of her belly is a skull. And here you see these women kind of just incorporated into the design, and why they lost their first baby. So we did a couple of paintings at this time, Hope. He hopes that he is able to have a child that lives. Here we are, modern day. There's a woman, Sarah Jane Wright. She does these kinds of images. In the middle, if you've been a working mother, you can probably relate to this. You got the kids over one arm trying to get to work and you're pregnant at the same time. But a modern day mother and child image could have a mother child in a laptop. That's reflective of real life. And you see the multitasking. The upper right was something posted on Facebook, and it was for Labor Day. They said, dedicated to all mothers who do all this labor and don't get paid. The lower right is an anti-abortion, pro-life image, and I'm not going to really deal with it except to say there's a lot of it out there. It's an evolving depiction of motherhood and life. Before I say anything, does anyone within the context of this talk, either on Zoom or in person, shout out what you think this could be? Do we have any guesses? All right, so I'll tell you about this. Yeah, so it's a performance-activated sculpture, and it's pantyhose filled with sand. And if you saw it in person, it goes in and out and in and out. And what it is, it's the womb, or it's the cervix. So when you get pregnant, you expand like we've been seeing in all these images, and then after the baby's born, you contract. And so that was what she did, a whole series, like shows dedicated to this. And it's the expansion, the physical expansion, the elasticity of strength of the body, but it's also the vulnerability of the body and the psyche. So she intended it to be on all levels. Now, this is more like the real thing, though, right? And it's one of the few images that I came across. And what you see is, this was from Judy Chicago, had a retrospective at the New Museum in 2023 to 2024. I really didn't know her work except the dinner party at the Brooklyn Museum. But she's just amazing if you ever get to see it. And she kind of put together this project. It's called the Birth Project. And she organized craftspeople. So she had tapestry makers, sewers, embroiderers, anything that was related to crafts. She pulled them together, and these are very large images. And there was a whole room full of it. But this is one of the few images where you really see the pain, and it's kind of like she's being ripped apart from the pain. So it's called the birth tear. But it represents, it's about as close as I could think to how I felt when I had a baby, Oh, yes, yes. But can you go back, David? See this? I took it to mean tear, but it could be either one because of the shape of that. Multiple meanings. Okay, so here we are. We have to recognize that there's over 500, there's a 500 million Buddhists on the planet, and there's this whole body of work out there about life of the Buddha. Like we talk, I'm showing you images of Jesus Christ. We look at the Passion, and the same thing is out there for Buddhism. So when we're in the Buddhist world, we talk about the birth of the Buddha. You see here, over here's this little figure of Buddha coming out of the side of the hip, not exactly anatomically correct, but of his mother Maya, into received always by this god Indra. And she's under the Bodhi tree, touching the leaf for support. And it's, I mean, this is highly influenced by Roman art. So after the baby's born, in Christianity, you see the nativity. A lot of times you'll see the Christ child on the ground or in a little manger. You're in a manger with the donkey again and the cow or the ox. And that's in the Metropolitan Museum also. So you're in the 15th century. Contrast what we just saw with the baby on the ground with this. It's a self-portrait. You know, these self-portraits by women are very, very powerful. So here she is after the birth of her baby, showing the baby to her other child, being attended to by a nurse. And she calls this romance. And she's really poking fun at this whole notion of what romance means, because romance leads to babies, which leads to motherhood and a lot of work, you know. And so she's kind of acknowledging it. And she has symbols here. This, the water's purity. You know, she's enriched this a lot, but in the end, it's kind of ironic. So Jacob Lawrence is an African-American artist. He passed away. He's lived in the South, and he did these epic series. The one that I seen the most of is called Migration, and it shows the migration from the South to the North of Black Americans, Black people. And it's epic. He deals with poverty. He deals with injustice. And here he is, though, dealing with a family. It was kind of unusual because it's kind of just one moment. Here's this baby, very tiny baby, and you have an artist, and they're cooing and oohing and eyeing and grinning, and they're very happy. And this is the way he chose to depict it, and it's quite unusual within his body of work. So after the baby's born too, you have nursing. You nurse the baby. So that is pretty common in art history. And I just showed you a range. Here's 15th century, and this is 17th century. And this is Artemisia Gentileschi. Also, she was the first, she was before Lebrun, the first recognized female artist. You know, her father was also a painter. And, you know, she finally got her due. And you see a very soft kind of imagery. And contrast this to The Mother and Child by Max Beckmann, who's a German expressionist, 20th century. And he is, it's more of a, it's a stereotype again, but it's bold and it feels more male to me. Max Beckmann, during this period, was painting a lot of circus figures. The figure here is undressed, but she's wearing these stockings or boots that could be performance shoes. So I have a feeling that this was a circus person. So leave it to Frida Kahlo, right, to make us uncomfortable. This is called My Nurse and I. And you see Frida Kahlo with an adult head on a body. And you see the nurse with a funerary mask that's pre-Columbian. It's a nod to her Mexican heritage. She had mixed heritage, European, Mexican. And, but, you know, why is the mask on there? She didn't really remember what the nurse looked like. she shows herself as an adult here, looking back on this childhood experience. And she was breastfed, but not by her mother, by a person that she apparently didn't feel supported and didn't really have a maternal relationship with. And by the way, this nurse was ultimately fired for drinking on the job. So this is a daughter-in-law and a granddaughter of Alice Neal. And I look at it, some people will try to tell me this is a happy painting. It's an intimate moment, but I feel like we've intruded, like we've opened up the door, right? And she looks up and the baby looks up like, who are you? Are you coming to relieve me? Let me go. So this is kind of I like this painting because it's complex. There's different elements emotionally to it, and motherhood to me is complex. On the other hand, if you look at 19th century Japanese prints, the ukiyo-e prints, ukiyo-e means floating world, you see joy, you see fun. You see a child here grabbing his mother, and she's playing a three-string instrument. She's all decked out in traditional garb, and that's the way all his images are. And they have the hairs, she's very coiffed. And on the right, she's supposed to be playing with the baby before it goes to bed and calm him down. But I would suggest to you that that baby doesn't look very calm to me. When you look at group pictures, you see this is one of the most famous ones by Norman Rockwell. And we can all identify, male or female, with Thanksgiving dinner, serving that big turkey to the family. And this one was called Freedom from Want. And it's Norman Rockwell. It was on the Saturday Evening Post cover in 1943. And it was made to boost morale during World War II, but also to sell war bonds. And why is it called Freedom from Want? He did a series of four. Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave a speech in 1941, the State of the Union address, and he talked about freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, and freedom from want, all relevant today. Here's a depiction by Carrie James Marshall. It's acrylic and it's collage. We haven't really seen any collage. This was significant in the artist's work because Sean Diddy Combs bought it for $21 million and set a record for his work. What you see is an African-American family enjoying a day at the park. You see that they're boating, they're water skiing. Here's a golfer on the left, croquet. But in the end, when you look at this, front and center is mother and two children. That is the focus on there. Diego Rivera vaccination. Only a girl from Detroit like me would ever find this. Because in the Detroit Institute of Arts, it's way up there in the corner. And here, I took these photos. In Detroit, they have a major Diego Rivera fresco cycle. They call it Rivera Court. And this is, to me, it's a reimagined mother and child painting in the modern age being treated by the doctor and the nurse. Like you see a nurse's cap there, but it's very white, like it's a halo. And you see this buzz of kind of blonde hair around the baby, who I think is Jesus. He's standing on the lamb, and the lamb is a symbol of God. You see the donkey, and you see the bull, you see the doctor, and the three wise men are now three scientists. So this idea is now, it's your responsibility to protect your child and move into the world of modern medicine, but it's still a Madonna and child to me. Here you see representations of motherhood in ceramic, in bronze, in wood, from ancient Egypt to ancient Mexico to Africa. So I kind of drawn to the second image here. It's so primitive, and yet somehow the mother's holding up the baby in a different position and really looks like she's enjoying the baby, very happy. Again, primitive, but somehow gets the emotion, very high on the emotions, which I don't think the other images do. So when we talk about protection, this is, photojournalism again, but this image really deals with protection on two levels. The first one is that this is Robin Moore is a conservation photographer. So he's interested in preserving and protecting the animals in their natural habitats. That's kind of his life mission, to protect the animals. And on the other hand, you see the mother elephant kind of, just covering the animal, her babies, so that she's totally protected. And it just communicates the maternal instinct to me in a big way. Okay, now we're coming to almost the anti Madonna and Child. Okay, on the far left, you have Edvard Munch lost a lot of family members. He lost his mother at a young age, and he lost his sister. He went to visit a hospital in Paris, and he painted the upper left-hand painting, which is an inversion of the Madonna and Child. Is about birth. It's about the future. This is about death, and it was about venereal disease. It was unheard of at the time, because you have a syphilitic mother there with the handkerchief, a syphilitic child that has red dots on the chest, and then the leaves in the dress, they're like dead falling leaves. So it's all about death, even though it's mother and child. The same thing here. You have, it's called Sick Child. His sister was dying of tuberculosis, and the mother was always had already passed away. So this is presumably the Aunt Karen. And you see how he scratches the surface of the paint in a different way to show the emotion, to show the decay. It's almost like the paint mirrors the body in this case. Very powerful series. Kathy Kollwitz, she lost a son in World War I. And this painting up here, where the two hands are cradling the head, was before that happened. You can tell the difference between the before and after. Her views on motherhood changed. So here it's mothers protecting their kids. They're in the underground in the UK in this picture. And here a mother is cradling the dead child, and the mother looks like a lion to me, an animal. It's raw. The emotion is just plain raw. And this was an impressive retrospective at MoMA in 2024. If you ever get to see a show of her again, I'd highly recommend it. Frida Kahlo, again, making us even more uncomfortable. She miscarried, and you see the blood on the bed, and you see she uses umbilical cords to connect to the fetus, to connect to a snail, representing the agonizingly slow process of losing this baby, connects to a pelvis which is broken. She had been in an accident and broken her pelvis previously. And then she was married to Diego Rivera, whose frescoes we just looked at in Detroit. She was in Detroit when she miscarried, and he gave her a purple flower afterwards. So it's fraught with symbolism, but it's also fraught with pain. So is this one. This is called Portrait of an Artist with a Portrait of Her Mother by Ahuya in 2020. So it's in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So what this is, it's about loss, it's about grieving, but it's for someone who's still alive. So her mother was dying of cancer, and she's holding her mother. And these other images were maybe her mother and the family at an earlier age when everybody was healthy. And you see her, it's very personal, this image. And the other thing is, she didn't idealize herself, because she has a lazy eye. She has an eye problem, and she depicted it here which you also don't see that often. Dorothea Lange, immigrant mother. So Dorothea Lange worked for the government, and her job was to depict what was going on with immigrants. She also depicted later on the Japanese internment camps. And this was year 7 of the Great Depression, and this was about survival. So this is a mother who Dorothea Lange talked to with her two children, and she lived in like this little shanty tent, and then she had a car. But the car didn't have any wheels on it because she had just sold the wheels to her car to pay for food for her children. So as a result of the work of Dorothea Lange, the government did step in. These were widely disseminated issues, and they started throwing money and trying to help these people that they really hadn't been aware of before. Kehinde Wiley. Kehinde Wiley did the portrait of Obama, the state portrait, where he was seated and against a whole bed of flowers. You can kind of see the influence here in these left 2 panels. But he was about depicting life, he said, of black and brown people, and young black and brown people specifically, to try and make them more majestic and heroic, and project, try and encourage them to know that they had the power within themselves to make a change. So by the very fact that he chose stained glass, which is normally found in a church and is very spiritual, he took this subject and he elevated it in a way that I really admire. And he uses, the other thing Kehinde Wiley does is he uses traditional iconography. In this case, he's borrowing the Virgin Mary. On the 3 women here, they have crowns, they have halos, and it's also a protection thing. Like here on the far left, it's don't mess with me, I've got my son, don't touch him, like very, very protective. Here we see a modern day version, almost, it reminds me of Michelangelo's Pietà, because it's a father carrying his dead child. And, it's called Lamentation. It's a series that he did for an exhibit in Paris about 10 years ago. And both the father and the son have halos. The father has a crown. And the other thing is, he's in what's called a mandorla, with this yellow orb type thing with stars going around it. And that imagery is usually reserved for Christ in the crucifixion or the transfiguration. But here he uses it in stained glass about black people. And it's, very, very powerful. The other thing is you don't actually, they were never really displayed like that. If you go here to the lower left, you see that what they did is, see, here's the image of the father. Actually, it's more than one he did. And they have their own like booth, so to speak. So you get to see the impact of one image at a time. But you really feel elevated. You feel that this is very spiritual. So I don't want to leave you there. We're near the end here. We're going to look at a wedding, the wedding party. I have weddings on the brain. So this is Henry Rousseau. He did a portrait from a photograph, and the bride is kind of floating. It's her grandmother and her grandfather, and it somehow works though. His work normally looks like what I've got here in the lower right-hand corner, so this is quite a departure from him. But the eyes of the animal and the eyes of the dog, you would recognize that Rousseau. So again, it's a monochromatic arrangement of a wedding, and it just kind of works. This is a monochromatic, it's a painting by Whistler. It's Whistler's mother, but it was originally entitled Arrangement in Gray and Black. So we're going to look at a couple famous mothers. This became really famous in 1934 because it was on a postage stamp dedicated to the mothers of America. Here we have Queen Nefertiti, who is the mother of Egypt. We have Queen Elizabeth II, immortalized here by Andy Warhol. She's always been regarded as the mother of England. At one point, she was regarded as the mother of the Commonwealth, but she actually presided over the decline of that. But nonetheless, a very famous mother. And we have Mother Teresa, mother of peace, mother of the world, with a smile there that could light the room. Rosie the Riveter, mother of the war. Norman Rockwell has now taken the baby in the lap and swapped it out for a riveting gun. This looks like a secular image. You see the flag, you see she's stepping on Mein Kampf, but at the same time, there's a halo above her. So there's religious overtones. There's also religious overtones in the selection of the pose. This was taken from Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, the prophet Isaiah. So there's these religious connotations, even though it's a secular image. And this image was also used to sell war bonds during the war. This is our last image today, the Mother of Liberty, a symbol of both French and American liberty. And what you see here, you have liberty leading the people. A woman, a female, she's now swapped out her riveting gun for a bayonet and a flag. And she's with her compatriot, like Pistol Pete with two guns. And she's climbing over the barricade, which consists of dead bodies. This was commemorating the toppling of King Charles X. So she was a woman of the people, and she was commonly known as Mary Ann. And she became a symbol of France and the French Republic and the struggle for freedom and justice. So she was the mother of France, she was the mother of liberty, and she also inspired this statue that then came over to the United States, whose original title was Liberty Enlightening the World. We could use some of that enlightenment the way the world is today. So she's known as Lady Liberty, the mother of exiles, after Emma Lazarus wrote her poem, and the mother of freedom. So we've looked at all these famous images of motherhood, from secular, starting with Madonna and Child, the secular images, all the way to contemporary images in the form of Rosie and Lady Liberty. But the most important mother is the one who forms her own life. And so I dedicate this talk to my mother and all of yours, and I wish you a happy Mother's Day. Thank you.